Welcome to the December 10, 2024 meeting of the Chatham Select Board. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair. Seeing no such notification, I'll proceed. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, Xfinity Channel 1072, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. First order of business is establishment of a quorum. Mr. Nicastro.
Present.
Mr. Shell is present. Ms. Davis?
Present.
And Mr. Metters?
Present.
Mr. Dykens is not present this evening. The agenda this evening consists of approval of the minutes of November 19, public announcements and agenda requests. We have one public hearing. We have a report from Director of Public Works, Rob Faley, on Chatham water and wells, etc. We then have public comments on the business agenda, and the business agenda consists of 5 items. Number 1 is establishing the date and time of the 2025 annual town meeting. Number 2 is considering an application and license for commercial non-fishing uses of the fish pier. Number 3 is a report from Finance Director Carrie Mazarol regarding the town capital improvements projects proposed for the next fiscal year and beyond. The next item is a recommendation from staff regarding the town's allocations of American Rescue Plan Act funds, also coming from Finance Director Mazarol. And then finally, we have appointments to Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee and the Historical Commission to consider. With that, I'll take a motion on the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of November 19th, 2024.
Second.
Any comments or corrections? Mr. Nicastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just one edit on page 9. I would suggest adding this sentence just immediately before the final paragraph. It would be a freestanding paragraph. It was noted for the record that both encroachments are on registered land, which protects the town against adverse possession and prescriptive easement claims. I'll repeat that. It was noted for the record that both encroachments are on registered land, which protects the town against adverse possession and prescriptive easement claims.
Okay.
That's it.
With those amendments, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nicastro.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is public announcements and agenda requests, first from the board. I don't see any from the board. Any from the public in the room? Don't see any of those. Anyone from public online? You see anybody, Jill?
No.
Okay, we'll move right on to our public hearing this evening, and I'll ask Clerk Davis to read the notice, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Town of Chatham Select Board Public Hearing Notice. Notice is hereby given that the Chatham Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, December 10th, 2024, at 5:30 PM in the large meeting room at the Town Office Annex 261 George Ryder Road, Chatham, and remotely via Microsoft Teams platform to consider requests for a change of manager from Gary S. Lulander to Sean Lineham, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on 2 annual all-alcohol beverages hotel licenses for CBI Operation LLC, doing business as Chatham Bars Inn, 297 and 286 Shore Road, Chatham. All interested parties are encouraged to participate. Sign the Select Board.
Thank you. Do we have someone on from CBI? Oh, please. If I could ask you to step to the microphone, introduce yourself, and just tell us a little bit about the proposed change, if you would, please.
One with the computer?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So the proposed
Yep.
change, sorry, I'm Sean Linehan. I'm the current resort manager at the Chatham Bars Inn.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry about mispronouncing your name.
You're okay. Perfectly fine. It happens all the time. I'm here because Gary Thulander's resigned his position at the resort. So we're looking to go ahead and then change over to me being the manager of the liquor licenses, as I currently oversee the food and beverage operations at the resort. Anyways, so we kind of go ahead and just make that transition over to myself to be the manager of those 2 liquor licenses, the one for the Shore Road, and then also the one on the main side of the road as well, too, for the main inn.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to let the board have any questions first. Anything? Dean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is really directed, I think, at staff. I don't know if, yeah, Shauna is on. Shauna, are we supposed to have a corporate vote attached to this type of change? I didn't see one in the packet.
I don't believe there's a corporate vote. I think it was just a corporate officer signing off that it was okay for.
Okay, I was directing that at our licensing agent. Sorry about that.
Yes, this is Shauna. No, Dean, it's not required.
Okay, great. And there were 2, was this just duplication of?
No, there are 2 licenses.
Oh, that's right. There were 2 licenses. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, yeah, I have no problem with this.
So I'll invite comments or questions from the public in the room. Anybody online? A motion?
Motion to approve the change, motion to approve the change of, how was it written? The change of manager for CBI operations, liquor license.
All those in favor? Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Linehan. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Next is a report from Rob Faley on our water situation. Welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Rob Faley, Director of Public Works. Just run down November's water report for you. So for treatment facility wells 5 and 8, I didn't provide a nice picture this month because basically it looks the same. We're doing a lot of the plumbing perforations and electrician perforations through the slab. So it's we poured recently, but that was in December, so there's not much to show. But project is moving along nicely. It's actually a little ahead of schedule, which is great. Well 11 is online. And the conservation easement for well 10 is still under review. Hopefully, we're going to get some answers on that soon. The wells have been running 6 to 10 hours a day, and we did not hit the low-level alarm this month. Water sampling, all the bacteria samples are coming back free of bacteria. PFAS samples were taken from the Mill Hill treatment plant on October 17th. That's well 11. Came back, we got the results in November. PFAS 6 had a result of 3.12, I think it's nanograms per liter or parts per trillion. It's a little concerning for us. We're keeping an eye on it. I think it may have something to do with low water table and the observation wells, but it's still below, well below Mass DEP's requirements and still below the proposed EPA requirements of 4 parts per trillion. Mr. DeCastro, do you have a question for me?
I was going to ask you if those were within the acceptable range.
It is, yes.
You've answered that question.
So
Thank you.
we'll test it again next quarter. And see.
What is the proposed,
Proposed is
new
4
level?
parts per trillion
sorry,
for.
4?
4. For a number of the PFAS chemicals. There's also, some of them are 10 parts per trillion. But PFAS 6 would be 4 parts per trillion.
Okay.
And again, that won't go into effect for another 2.5 years or so. Station maintenance, well 6, we got that back in service. Our subcontractor is pressure washing the storage tanks to get those in shape. And well 4, we went through, did some rehab on well 4, put a VFD screen in and balanced the motor. So that's up and running and performing nicely now. Other system maintenance is ongoing. I can go over some of that if you like, or you've got the report. So if we look at November 2023 versus November 2024, we're still lower than we were last year, about 1 million gallons, down about 5%. No huge spikes or anything like that in any daily amounts. And then we look at the pumping comparison graph. Hopefully that's a little larger this time for everyone to see. It does show some spikes last year, but this year, even on weekends, I think we're tailing off. And once the holidays are over, I think we'll be at our lowest levels of the year. And here it is, just the pumping comparison graph again. November 24 is in the pink. So this is the daily effort for the month of November. You can see there are quite a few blank days on there, and I'll explain those because we were flushing hydrants, and we were getting some dirty water complaints, and we think it's just maybe the way that our new operation managers have decided to flush. I think it's just stirring up some dirty water in some areas that we haven't seen it in a while. So we shut down wells 1, 2, and 3, and also well 11 to kind of resolve some of those dirty water complaints. This time of year, the other wells have plenty of capacity to meet the demand. So we just figured we would try that and shut it down. The water has since cleaned up, and well 11 is back online again. And again, well 4 shows a big gap there because we were doing the motor balancing and the VFD filter. There's just the level of effort in a bar graph form. And this just shows the monthly totals for the year. We're at 453 million gallons pumped, which is just about 7 million gallons lower than last year. Again, the level of effort in a bar graph just showing how much wells 1, 2, and 3 contribute to our overall mission. Here's observation well data. Chatham, you can see it looks like it's starting to level off from the seasonal decline. We'll find out. I know rain recently and rain that's forecasted is going to help us start climbing out. It's typically around the turn of the year where we really see things start to climb again. And this is Brewster's chart. Again, Brewster is kind of the bellwether for all the Cape, and you can still see it's in a seasonal decline. We're getting close to the trough that we were in last year, so we'll see if the weather is changing, and we're going to see it start to climb, and I think it'll be a better outlook for all of us if it does. And this is just the 5-year comparison. You can see 18.8 million gallons in November. It's a little bit lower than our average, but you'll also notice that the pumping hours are quite a bit high, and that's because we had so many of the wells shut down for a portion of the month for maintenance. But that's all I have for you, unless you have any questions.
Corey?
Just one quick little question I have is, it's under system maintenance. I know the water service material data collection thing that's been going on for, a fair amount of time now. First, how is that coming along? Are we getting a good percentage of the residents kind of in the inventory of what we have for material? And can you just kind of explain a little bit in a quick summary, like, why are we doing this? 'Cause I had an interesting conversation this morning, which kind of brought it up, my curiosity here.
So it's an EPA-driven request. It's nationwide. Every community has to do the same thing. We have like 7,500 roughly water customers. We had about 1,600 that we could not confirm what material was, either on the public side or the private side, what material their service lines were feeding water into their house. So we did send out we made a report to DEP in October before the deadline. Then we sent out letters to all 1,600 residents, and we're getting a really good response, but we have to we've got some time, but we have to try to figure out what their water line is and confirm that it's not lead. We haven't run across any lead service lines yet, so that's the good news. And if we get to a certain percentage of no lead, DEP may, they kind of assume that the rest of the town is okay. So we have to work with them, get the 1,600 number down quite a bit, and then just keep them in the loop. And we're still updating all of our information, so we're gaining on it.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just you focused me on the 5-year chart, the number of hours. Is that each one, that's the number of hours in a day that any pump was running?
That's correct.
Is that the way it works? Okay.
And they typically all come on at the same time.
Right. No, you've answered my question. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. Next, the annual meeting, annual town meeting, forgive me, public comments. Thanks. Any public comments on the agenda? Ms. Gibbs?
Yes, thank you. I have a few. One is on the town capital improvement projects. The first one is the transfer station. This is where 3.9 million for phase 1 priority 2. At the last meeting, where there was a lot of discussion, I think it was confirmed that the damage done to the flooring in the blue building is primarily because of the commercial haulers. And we have, I believe, 3 that are permitted, and there was a big discussion about that. And through questioning, we found out that, they bring in their refuse, construction material and garbage from surrounding towns. They bring it in from Harwich, Orleans, and Brewster. We also learned that Brewster doesn't even allow commercial haulers, so we're getting all of their construction material and their garbage. And Harwich brings it to us because they either have to get someone to take it from them or they have to drive it off Cape. So we're being asked to pay $3.9 million to renovate that building when 90% of it probably doesn't even belong to us. And there's been talk that, eventually our rates are going to go up again as residents to have permits to dump there. So until we come up with a plan to restrict commercial haulers from bringing in refuse from other towns, find a way to do that, I don't think we should be doing it. We've become a regional transfer station, and that's not what we intended. That is not the purpose. And it does say it would benefit the residents. As far as the dump off where we go, that's not being improved. We don't get any additional parking. We still have to jockey. It's going to be the same situation. What's expanding is the recycling area, and it's massive, and it's unnecessary in my view. It's a big circle. People have to get out of their cars. I think that should be redesigned. So I hope no decisions are made on that. The second item is The wastewater and sewer design, 32 million. In there, you're allocating 1.5 million for the first phase of the grinder pumps. And again, we had this discussion. I think that this is premature to do it in increments like this. Numbers were thrown around at the last meeting where this could cost multi-million dollars for the grinder pumps. There are all kinds of things that various groups want. And if we start doing it, you've set a precedent. Again, there are people in town that are going to have to hook up to the sewer that have all different kinds of issues, whether it's their setbacks, if they're in between two pump stations, their stub could be 25 feet below the surface that they're going to have to trench to. And those who can no longer use, town water for irrigation, they have to put in a separate meter or they have to put in a well. And so I think, once again, you set a precedent, and until those inequities are worked out, I don't think we should be doing that. And the second part of that is the discussion about the phase one of the sewer project, the comprehensive wastewater plan. And basically they said we've spent $137 million. Phase one is to sewer 2/3 of the town. I've given these numbers before, and I've asked how much this is actually going to cost us. Originally, back in 2010, the whole project was going to be $280 million. Well, that was a long time ago. And we still don't have those numbers. We were supposed to have them by the end of the year. What we need to meet the 5-year plan. We're supposed to have, by 2030, about 5,100 houses connected to the sewer. Right now, with the money we've appropriated, by 2025, we'll have less than 1,000. So there are 4,000 homes, 3,800 homes, that will not be meeting that 2030 deadline. And I understand there were, delays with COVID, et cetera, but we want to reduce nitrogen levels. So we need to know what the expenses are moving forward on the wastewater comprehensive plan to sewer the town. The thing that's really unfair is that everybody's paying for it. So there, that 1/3 that doesn't have to be done until 2030, 2040, is paying, and they will never be sewered. Those people who have been paying since 2012 and will not get sewered by 2030 are still paying for it. And now they're going to be asked to continue to pay out of the water rates these additional costs of $32 million. So I would hope that before any decisions are made on this, we get hard and fast numbers. Is the sewer project, in my estimation, we still have $350 million ahead of us to get phase one done, based on what it's cost for less than 1,000. Because the center of town all has to be done over. We can't count those. They were on the sewer from 1973 or something, and they're collapsing and they have to be redone. So we are way behind schedule, and I think the taxpayers should know how much that's going to cost. So those are my 3 items on that. And the last one is the American Rescue Plan. I just read that tonight, and I was kind of surprised that we have $567,000 that can be used for construction of roads, infrastructure, public safety, other services, health and education. And the staff has recommended that $433,000 be used to upgrade the public restrooms at the town hall. We could build a nice little affordable housing unit for that. I can't believe that upgrading to make it handicap accessible would cost $433,000. And I guess I'm concerned that we need to tell them by December 31st, even though this money has been available for some time. And I think this is worthy of a bigger discussion. That's a lot of money to just decide that we want to spend it on that and $17,000 for a net request public records management, Civic Plus, just something else for the public to have to learn how to access it and get public records. So I would hope that that doesn't get approved tonight. I don't know if you can get a delay. I just think we should have been told about 500,000 is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money. And I think we could have allocated it, for example, on fixing the sidewalks downtown so people don't keep tripping on them. That's infrastructure and that's public safety. I think that would be money much better spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Any other comments? I don't see anybody in the room. Do you have anybody else, Jill? Okay. Now we can move on to, where do we go next here? The business agenda. First item is the date and time of the 2025 annual town meeting. Do you want to give us kind of the outline, Jill or Kathy?
Sure, I'll start. So as you recall, the town had accepted a bylaw to allow the select board to set the date for town meeting for another date in May versus the second Monday that had been in the bylaws. So with that, Kathy has contacted the regional school committee office to find out availability of the dates, as well as our Chatham TV contractors. And at this point, she's listed the dates that are available to have the town meeting. The one date that our contractors, our audio contractors, are not available is Saturday, May 3rd. Apparently that is a Kentucky Derby day, so they're tied up with that. Other than that, I can say that staff does like the date of May 12th. When it comes to planning and getting the warrant to the printer, gives us probably another meeting in March or so, but certainly we're open to any date as well as either a Saturday or a Monday.
Thank you. Thoughts from the board? Corey, go ahead.
I mean, from a personal perspective, the Saturday, the 17th, I have a little bit of a conflict, so I would not lobby to go on that date, but, you know, this throwing my personal. More practical, I'm kind of getting the feeling we're leaning toward Mondays versus the Saturdays. Don't have a hard stance one way or another, but I'm kind of getting the feeling we're going to be leaning toward a Monday date. But frankly, I'm open to anything that's on the table here, except for the 3rd and the 17th, I guess.
Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally open to anything. I did receive a communication today from someone who suggested that Saturday attendance is easier for a lot of people in town, particularly younger families, that you can't do it in the evening. We changed the bylaw a few years ago to give us the flexibility because we didn't want to be locked into Monday. But I wanted to throw that comment out for consideration. If we were to do it on a Monday, I would favor the 12th. If we were to do it on a Saturday, I would favor the 10th. That doesn't move the town business into the latter part of the month. The election could still be held on the 15th. But I don't know. I do recall observing that and the attendance from the public was, in terms of the faces I saw in the audience, not much different between Saturday and Monday, but I wasn't obviously able to see who was in the other room, or rooms, plural. And the Saturdays that we did do, I think with one exception, were outdoors. So there was a different feel. But I just would like us to talk a little bit about these options as we decide what to do.
Shereen?
Yeah, I favor a Saturday over a Monday evening in its practicality. I think it goes back to the 365 recommendations that we had, the original time that we had instituted that or had brought it up was out of that recommendation for those very reasons you said, Dean. So if we were to pick a day, for me, it would be Saturday, May 10th, or Monday, the 12th. But I do prefer the Saturday.
Yeah, I was firmly on the Saturday program, based mostly, although I wasn't on the board at the time, the 365 recommendation. But then, subsequently, there was some commentary to the effect that Saturday was either a sports practice day or a sports game day, or people wanted to be out on their boats or whatever, and it seemed that no matter what we did, there was there was a countervailing consideration being articulated that was reasonable. It wasn't compelling any more than the initial one was. So I'm indifferent. I think that, I guess the only thing that would push me toward Monday is the fact that, maybe people just have a little bit more of a sense of urgency, and maybe it makes the meeting a little shorter, but that's probably more fantastical than anything else. Corey?
The simple history is there's no perfect date. We've tried both. I'm not dead set on the 10th or the 12th. I'm ready to move forward either way. I honestly am. The people who really want to engage on whatever the topics are this year, they're going to show up regardless of the date. So I'm very neutral. But either the 10th or the 12th, I could support either one.
Okay, well, we've got agreement on that. Go ahead,
Okay,
Sheree.
so just to argue for the Saturday a little more, it's during the day. It's not dark out. We've had a lot of people, elderly, that have said that they didn't like to drive at night. Coming out of the school is super dark. I did notice this last time. There's no lighting in the back of the building, and it's kind of difficult to navigate. And so I think, it's our obligation to get the vote there, whatever the vote would be. We can all work hard to, inform and to provide the best opportunity for everybody. So I'm leaning heavy towards Saturday.
Dean?
Yeah, the communication I received today also referenced Chatham 365. I wanted to ask Jill, does it cost more to do it on a Saturday? Do we have overtime, that sort of consideration?
It probably just levels out, to tell you the truth, with town meeting starting at 6 p.m. anyway. For our police details, police officers are working anyway. So I don't see, if the board wants to move with a Saturday meeting, I think that's fine. I don't think it would be any added cost to it.
I think I would come down on Saturday. I don't have a strong feeling about it, but that's where I'm coming down.
I'm fine with Saturday. Can we do it in the morning, though? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking and reading, if we do a Saturday, it's going to be an earlier meeting. If we do Monday, it's obviously going to be a later meeting. So if we're going to do it Saturday, we're not doing a late night one. We're doing
A day.
11, 12, 11?
And
Jill, what did we do before? Was it noon or 1?
I think so when we were back indoors on a Saturday for a special town meeting, I think that was 1 o'clock. When we were outdoors, we had it like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. But we needed time to wipe off the seats and everything since they were outdoors, so your preference.
Well, I'm going to express a equally strong preference that it be in the morning. I'm not going to argue between 10 and 11, but I'm not sure I understand what the rationale is to start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, other than maybe we did it before.
I'd rather go at 11 myself. I think you could encourage some little charity group to set up a little snack shop in the cafeteria for snacks and lunches and something, I don't know, whatever, that if we take a short break. So I think starting at 11, we could be out by mid-afternoon, earlier maybe. I think I'd recommend, okay, you want me to make a motion? I'll make a motion that we set the date and time of the 2024 town meeting as Saturday, May 10th, 2025, with a start time of 11 a.m.
Second.
At the Chatham Middle.
at the Chatham Middle School.
Second. All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Okay. That was easy. We have an application and a correlative license for commercial non-fishing uses of the fish pier. And we have Jason Holm and Greg Berman, and I'll let you guys decide who's going to talk.
Maybe I'll start off. Greg Berman, your Director of Natural Resources. So it was just about a year ago today that we were before you with some contractors that were doing work at the fish pier. We, took to heart the idea that we were going to come up with a procedure, policy, some kind of method for documenting how somebody gets approval to do that, what fee there is, what security deposit there is, the rationale about how the area should or shouldn't be used. That's what you have before you today. We have an application that if the application is granted, we would have the license at the end. The license has gone through town council. We do repeatedly say throughout that this does not negate either the select board regulations or the waterways regulations. We tried to, and when I say we, Department of Natural Resources with the Harbor Master and Coastal Resources Director really tried to capture everything we thought we might need in order to determine whether this might have a negative impact on the fish pier operations or the facility itself. So it would be highly unlikely that anything damaging would ever be permitted, but the potential risk is in here. So we have a guidance criteria for the level of use. The idea with this is there may be something that is relatively, a negligible impact, but that said, we'd still like the process and the insurance requirements that this process would give us. Then we have the other uses, the minor, moderate, and major, that these would be defined with the applicant with conjunction of town staff, and then, a recommendation or not from our various division heads to be submitted to the town manager for ultimate approval or non-approval. At this point, the approval notice would go to the Ladies Cove Committee to make sure that the fishing community is aware of anything that might be going on down there, and that this work specifically is stated not to have any impact on the leaseholders or the commercial fishing industry down there. We don't have specific time of year restrictions, but that would be highly noted in the recommendations by the Harbor Master and Coastal Resource Director in response to how that may or may not impact activities down there. Just for example, it would be highly unlikely to do anything in the summer. Basically this is what we feel is a decent method for getting the insurance, security deposit, and fees in place. We did take a look at some of the other towns when coming up with the fees and security deposits. Nobody else has a fish pier. It's a special place. So it's not like there's a direct correlation that we can look to, but we are at least in the ballpark. And when we start getting into these moderate and majors, we want to make sure that the town is appropriately covered for anything that might be occurring. And with that, I'm happy to take questions. We have our Harbor Master and Coastal Resource Director as well.
Thank you.
Shereen?
Thank you. I have one question, and I was wondering if there was a consideration to limit the number of licenses that could occur at any given time. The activity be limited to one, there wouldn't be more than one or two at one time. And is it limited to use of the land, the parking lot, moorings? How is this defined?
Sure, so this specifically would be for the land-based side, that they would still need to coordinate with the harbor master for anything in the water. And then the other part of your question, whether things will be kind of occurring at the same time, really first come, first serve. If somebody already has a license in place, we would view the next application
with the knowledge that there is something already occurring in that area, and making sure that it wouldn't disrupt, the existing use of the leaseholders and fishing, and also each other. If one group wants to use the north jog, the other the south, and it's not going to impact anything or each other, it might be feasible. But again, it would be very case-by-case dependent.
Are there any expectations that there would be any staging on the land side? Is that something that, like, say somebody was doing a construction project, repairing a dock or putting a revetment in, and they wanted to store equipment on town land? Is that expressed in the lease?
So that would be one of the aspects. That's something that people have expressed interest in the past about. Whether it's staging a piece of equipment, like an excavator, or whether it's just access up and over to go to another area, would kind of kick things into another use level. And then, what is being stored? Is it, soft fiber rolls that have a very minimal impact? Is it large boulders that would need pads underneath and an engineer certification that it would not cause damage to the property? So it very likely folks are going to want to store things, just because this entire stretch of shoreline has very little real estate at high tide. And that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to access for coastal protection.
All right, so I see the picture better, thank you. And I have some real concerns about that sort of activity for our town property, especially the fish pier with, I know it's much quieter in the wintertime and minimal activity, but I have real concerns on whether we're actually going to be using the municipal fish pier as a storage area for staging for companies to be able to do other work. I just don't know if that's the appropriate use at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, but just picking up from what Shireen was saying, I guess I would have that concern also. Even if you had if you required an engineering certification that no damage is going to be caused, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And if you were going to use that mechanism, maybe you'd want to build that into the license, form of license, and add a provision. But let me just go through a couple of things. I don't have many. On the application, under the paragraph that's headed license granting processes, just in the fourth line, there's just a grammatical correction. The third word where it says commercial fishing must, I think the word must should be changed to the word to grammatically within that sentence. And then on the guidance criteria for the license on page 3, under the major use category, number 4, space required, it says majority of the parking area or any portion of critical access areas. What about the pier? That's not referenced here. It is referenced under moderate use, which says a more significant portion of the pier or parking area. So I'm just not sure why that's missing. You see my point?
Yes, we could introduce the pier into the major use.
Yeah, that's all I'm getting at. Then on the next page, page 4, the harbor master's recommendation, it references 10C. Is that a state license? Is that what that refers
That's
to?
the Chapter 91 10C license. It's the same statute we use for docking permits, special
Okay.
use permits. So that was put in there to denote during the application process if that's going to be required with them utilizing the bulkhead.
Okay. And then I think it's my final question, yes. The security deposit that's referenced in the lease, who makes that determination? How much is it? Is that up to the town manager or the staff on case-by-case basis, or is there any kind of scale?
So it would be on a case-by-case basis. The idea is for the applicant to work with town staff to come up with the use category, and the use category is a sliding scale for fees in addition to security deposits. If the applicant, puts a use that town staff did not approve or agree with, under their recommendation, they would make that very clear to the town manager.
Okay, so let me go back to the original point that Shireen brought up. And I appreciate the staff bringing this forward at the suggestion of the board from one time we did, maybe I think there were two, have to deal with this. But now that we see this in front of us, I guess it's legitimate to ask the question, why do we need it at all? Why don't we just do this ad hoc? How many of these requests do we get every year? I would hate to see the pier become a storage area as a matter of course, as opposed to licensing it for that purpose on an occasional basis, as we might determine to be in the best interest of the town. So I'll throw that question out for anybody who wants to talk about it.
Maybe I could touch briefly on it, just that, this is intended for uses that don't have any other options, or the other options are not feasible at that point. So we do ask them to specify, what alternatives they could have used and why this is the pretty much only thing left to them.
I guess I'll just ask the question in response. So if this were to be approved as presented with minor modifications as we've talked about just now, the final determination would be made on the recommendation of the various departments or divisions within your department and by the town manager. I'm wondering if, in order to introduce another level of protection of the town, it has to come back to the select board, so that we could say, we don't really want to have this particular operation going on. We approve so many other licenses on the waterfront. I don't know if that, Shireen, does that offer some protection?
It does to some degree, because I wasn't going to vote to approve this tonight. I just wasn't as it stands. But if that is if that's somehow we can have a little better control over it. But I guess if we have a license in place and it's structured, then it's formulaic for us to consider. I don't know what kind of factors would change an approval.
I guess
if it all met its criteria.
I guess we could insert in the application or description of the application process, license granting processes, that final determination is to be made by the select board in their discretion, absolute discretion.
I think Jill.
So that we,
Can I weigh in on this?
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I am really reluctant to do this. I think we've made millions of dollar investment into our infrastructure there at the Fish Pier. And so if we are to do this, it is absolutely intermittent use. It's not for a contractor saving money to use a town resource in order to carry out some activity for a private property. So I think I'm probably more inclined to deny it than maybe the board would be. But I certainly understand there are occasions, the intermittent occasions, where something might be needed. And maybe it's limited to, and I'll have Jason weigh in, maybe it's limited only to February and March. I mean, we have an obligation to our leaseholders that are there, the public, the restaurant. It is such a congested area that I can't see any major use being approved that would take up the pier or the parking. It would have to be some emergency use, and primarily, I would think, in servicing the town. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Corey?
Well, no, first, I very much appreciate that statement by the town manager about, why we're doing this. I personally don't want to do anything that's going to promote people coming forward to use the pier. I know we're trying to safeguard things, but as has been mentioned, millions of dollars has been spent in this area, and I don't want it to become the best option because it's the cheapest option. That's the last thing I want to start promoting of it. So if we don't approve this and someone does have a situation that comes up, we have a little more experience discussing it, but we can do it on a case-to-case basis outside of having this document put together. I mean, we did it before. I don't think we really need to do anything that's going to promote excessive use of the facilities. That's my own 2 cents worth.
Okay, I'm just gonna weigh in here because I have had the same reservations, particularly as I looked at the major use and some of the qualifications, major area, majority of the parking area or any portion of critical access areas that is being required. That to me is a huge red flashing light. Where it says none of these use categories may disrupt leaseholder operations, how is that, how is that both enforced, but also how is that, factored into the decision? One of the things I was going to ask before Dean put the select board on the table was where in the process is Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee informed and have an opportunity to weigh in. The only thing I would say in favor of this, taking Jill's comments to heart, is that we have a structure here so that somebody has to put together all the elements of an application. The thing I don't like about ad hoc applications is, it's sort of, we have to think up what the concerns are, and there's not a uniform case-to-case-to-case treatment of the requests. And that doesn't mean that we can't say that this is an extraordinary, this is an extraordinary accommodation by the town that is rarely, if ever, given and only in dire circumstances. And then, we'll have the last say. And I'm not arguing to do anything tonight necessarily, but I do think that there must have been some initiative or inertia from somewhere that put this on the table. And I think, maybe if we structure it in a way that we think we have control of all the factors, maybe that's something that's worth considering. Do you want to comment, either of you?
Please. So a year ago, there were the 2 contractors using the facility that, eventually got licensed at the last minute. Part of the impetus for bringing this to you now is that another contractor would like to use the facility. We are very hesitant to do anything at the Fish Pier without a lot of documentation and a process in place. So we're bringing this forward to the select board to, get something in place before telling a potential applicant what method they might use.
There's not a lot of these requests really that come across. Like Jill kind of said, I'm not prone to really grant any during season or anything that would affect the leaseholders or the permit holders at the pier. February, March is relatively dead down there. If a request didn't affect any town property nor hinder the operations down there, it's not as big of an issue. But that is a pier meant for a specific purpose. We put a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of investment in the infrastructure. So it's not something that we're really, at least certainly I'm keen on doing, and it would be those kind of special circumstances. There's also language in the Selectmen Fish Pier regulations that talks of that would not preclude the select board from licensing parking in the upper lot for a special event. So there's mention of some type of a license, at least in the upper parking lot. Never really seen that worked, so looking at this might be the same form possibly utilized for that type of purpose as well. But that's the only reference that I could find in any of the regulations that kind of spoke to anything close to this.
Yeah, I mean, coming into this meeting, I was very much inclined to support this, but I'm influenced by the discussion we've had tonight. And Mr. Chairman, you make a very good point about having something in place, but you could also have something in place that's simply an internal, I'll call it a checklist, of what we should be looking for before the staff comes before this board, because it's this board that controls the fish pier, with a recommendation to do something. I guess I lean more in the direction of, at a minimum, further study of this. I know you have somebody pending. I'm not sure what they're looking to do, but, or simply saying, let's just continue with the ad hoc approach, but let the town manager and the town staff distill an internal document from these materials that you've already presented, and use that as the basis for making a recommendation back to us. And the ultimate authority would remain with the select board. As everyone has said, we've spent a ton of money on that fish pier, and it's working better than it ever has, and I'd hate to jeopardize that. Thank you.
I agree with you. I think that that's the best approach, is that we still hold the control with they can come before us and have an internal document with a checklist. It just makes sense. It's more efficient, and that way we have still maintain our control. We maintain our, we listen to the public. We hear what the public has to say about our resources. So, that's where I'm going to lean. I'm not going to, if we take no action on this tonight, on this particular lease, that's fine. If it goes to vote, I will vote no.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm sorry, Greg, just to say, the only other element I would say is if the potential applicant wants to make a proposal requesting use, they have a format, you have a format, and that can be kind of a test case for us. But I think it ought to be clear that this is extraordinary and not something that'll be granted except in really extreme circumstances. You were going to say, Greg?
Yep. Understand where the board is coming from, and I just wanted to reiterate that, town staff is not trying to use this to increase use of the fish pier in any way. This is just a way to try to, document, formalize, and get the proper approvals.
Appreciate that, thanks. And I know a lot of work went into this, and however it get used, either as an ad hoc basis or otherwise, it will be useful, so thanks for that.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Okay, next case. Capital Improvement Projects. Carrie Mazerol, Director of Finance.
Hi, good evening. Carrie Mazerol, Finance Director. We're going to go over the capital improvement projects. This is for discussion tonight for the annual town meeting. Sorry, this mouse is like sticking. Whoops. Okay. The capital improvement plan are for additional articles that are over $250,000. Funding sources include borrowing, raise and appropriate, free cash, and other available funds. As you are all aware, free cash was certified at $11.1 million. We'd like to use, for the 5-year capital plan, $2.5 to $3 million for our free cash. Doing this will provide, leaving $8 to $7.5 million for the additional capital project requests. The capital projects proposed, this is a list of the other capital items that would fall under separate articles. The Center for Active Living renovations, this is a placeholder. Transfer station improvements, sewer capital items, wastewater sewer design and construction, dredging, a new ambulance, and community center flooring. And for the water department, a water storage tank repairs and painting. Again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the potential projects and prioritize the articles for inclusion in the FY 2025 town meeting. There are several projects that have been brought to us, but these are the ones that we feel are the biggest priorities. Number one, the Center for Active Living renovations. The $5 million planning value is based on a preliminary estimation of bidding, construction, site work, management, oversight, soft, and contingency costs. This value is intended to provide an order of magnitude of potential costs of discussing capital options while awaiting the final third-party cost estimation to be presented in early January 2025. The ultimate number of a potential article request will hinge upon design options exercised in the final approved schematic concept, consider phasing, value, engineering, and other cost programming considerations. The current projected amount for the Center for Active Living renovations is $5 million. Again, it's subject to the final estimate presented in January. This project is a placeholder. The first option for the proposed funding for this project is to use $5 million in free cash, which would have no impact to the tax rate. The second option is to fund this project with a portion of free cash and a portion of borrowing. So $2.5 million of free cash, and then estimated to be $2.5 million of borrowing. The second option would then provide free cash for the other potential capital requests versus having to raise and appropriate. Transfer station improvements. This project was brought to the town meeting last fiscal year. The project encompasses the final design and construction of the recycling area, Phase 1, and rehab of the tipping floor. It is estimated to cost $3.9 million. Funding for this project under option 1 would be $3 million of free cash and $900,000 from raise and appropriate. The $900,000 would have an impact on the tax rate of 8 cents, or $92.61 for a single-family home valued at $1.2 million in FY 2026. Option 2 would be to fund this completely through free cash and have no impact on the tax rate. The next project is wastewater capital stabilization funding. This project involves 3 items for the sewer capital requests. There's a Stage Harbor pump station in the amount of $700,000, replacement of denitrification filters, air filters.
Denitrification.
Thank you. In the amount of $200,000 and $170,000 for the annual sewer collection system repairs. The total amount of this capital request is $1,070,000, which would be funded from the wastewater capital stabilization fund and have no tax impact. The fund currently has $4.5 million available, and if this article is approved, would have an estimated balance of about $3.8 remaining. And as noted in my staff report, there is an additional money coming in as well. So the next project is the wastewater sewer design and construction. Sewer expansion is critical to support continued efforts to reduce nitrogen in waterways. This funding request will closely match the 2024 Clean Water Trust State Revolving Fund request to support the next design phase and construction efforts. An additional amount of $1 million to $1.5 million is a placeholder for a future discussion to fund the first phase of grinder pump purchases, which was not eligible for the state revolving fund or Clean Water Trust reimbursement. If this is approved by the Select Board, this request for wastewater and sewer design construction is part of the initial wastewater plan for the town of Chatham. And Rob Faley is our DPW director. He is here if anybody has any questions about the wastewater. And the staff report also provides additional details. So there's some additional capital items that are over $250,000. These include $400,000 for dredging, $410,000 for a new ambulance, and $300,000 for the community center flooring. Option one would be to fund these through raise and appropriate, which would impact the tax rate accordingly. Dredging would impact the tax rate 3 cents. I just want to remind everybody this is an annual request that we have. And then there's the ambulance would impact 4 cents on the tax rate. We fund a new ambulance every 2 years. The community center would have a 3 cents impact on the tax rate. Option two would be to fund these projects completely through free cash and have no tax impact to the tax rate, sorry. There's one article, potential article for the water department. This is for the water storage tank repairs and painting. The estimated cost is $2.1 million. The water storage tank repairs and painting is a water department project, and the American Water Works Association recommends reapplying protective coatings on water storage tank every 10 years to maintain structural integrity and ensure water quality. This particular tank was painted back in 2011, so 13 years since it was last painted and is due for maintenance. This project proposes a borrowing with an estimated cost of $2.1 million, and the borrowing would be applied to the water department debt if this project were to be moved forward and approved. An estimated amount of this project for a 20-year loan with an estimated cost of 4.5% interest rate would be around $105,000 for principal and $94,500 for interest in the first year. And that's just based on borrowing for the full amount in the first year. This slide goes over the debt service currently for the water department for FY 2026. So it's $2.5 million currently, $2 million in principal payments, and $441 in interest, and $50,000 for short-term borrowing that we have. This debt is not taking into consideration any borrowings that may occur at the end of FY 2025, the current fiscal year, for any ongoing projects that the town has approved previously. And this slide is, goes over the general fund debt. The general fund's debt service for FY 2026 is currently $8.57 million for 2026. This includes $6.8 million in principal, $1.6 in interest, and $150,000 for short-term borrowing. Again, this is the debt service as of now and does not take into consideration any borrowings that may occur at the end of FY 2025. This slide is an overview of option one for funding. I just want to put this down. As you can see, this includes the Center for Active Living placeholder with the option of using free cash in the amount of $5 million. Again, this is still under review with final estimates in January. Option one is only providing the use of free cash for the Center for Active Living and $3 million for the transfer station improvements. Leaving a $2.5 million available for the 5-year capital plan. So this slide shows the balance of free cash if we were to go with option one. This shows that the other projects presented would be applied to the raise and appropriate in the amount of just over $2 million, which would impact the tax levy for one fiscal year. Option one is utilizing $8 million of free cash for the Center for Active Living renovations project and the transfer station. We would have around $550,000 available from free cash if we were to go this route for any additional items that may arise throughout the time that we go through this. Option two, this would all depend on the decision for the Center for Active Living project. If the town decides to move forward with the Center for Active Living renovations, The second option, as presented in the slide, is to fund this project with a portion of free cash and a portion of borrowing. Option 2 also provides available free cash for the other projects, including funding the transfer station fully through free cash versus having to raise and appropriate those funds through the tax levy. This option would also be using free cash in the amount of $7.5 million versus the $8 million, and having $3 million available for the 5-year capital plan. So this is a breakdown of option 2. As you can see, the option 2 would have the 7.5 for the capital projects and $3 million available for the 5-year capital plan. And with this option would provide us with a reserve of about $600,000 for other items that may arise. There's no, on this second option, as you can see, there's no option for the raise and appropriate, and the offset would be the borrowing for the Center for Active Living. So this slide shows a side-by-side of option 1 and option 2. As you can see, there are funds under the raise and appropriate on option 1 in the amount of $2 million and nothing under option 2. As well as the borrowing for the Center for Active Living, it's not, under option 1, there's nothing listed, but on option 2, it's listed for a borrowing. So those are the differences. And then you can see up top in the free cash where the differences are as well. As of right now, the capital plan utilized either $2.5 to $3 million would put us around 5.94% to 6.92% of the operating budget. And that's based on our current information that we have right now for our operating budget. And it's not finalized yet, so I'm just kind of estimating what we have so far for our figures. This is still within the 9%, which is in adherence to our town's financial policies. I understand that it's difficult to prioritize capital projects with many identified and competing needs that we have for FY 2026, but we'll be presenting more formally in January as well. So that's kind of what we have so far. Do you guys have any questions?
Dean?
Yeah, I have some questions and some comments, but let me just say thank you for the very comprehensive memo and the slide presentation. Can we have the slide presentation
Absolutely.
forwarded to the select board?
Sure, no problem.
Everything is distilled concisely there.
Yeah.
Either of these options leave free cash in the $500,000 to $600,000 range.
Yes.
That will be replenished, though. It is annually, depending on how much is transferred back. What other sources go into free cash?
So free cash is usually like when we estimate our revenues lower, so then we have like higher revenues that close, and then if we have expenses left over, that close. So it all takes kind of into consideration. Yeah.
So let me just offer a couple of comments. I may have a question or two as well.
Sure.
They're all important projects. I think among the more pressing projects are the Center for Active Living and the transfer station. And let me just separate out a question that was raised in the public comment section by Ms. Gibbs. Perhaps at some point we should, I know we've had this conversation before when we've considered rates, talk with the haulers to see whether separating out of-town refuse is possible. I don't know if it is or isn't, but I'd be interesting to get that. I'm a customer of one of them. That's not a 268A issue, but I just point that out. Let me talk for a moment about a couple of these projects. The transfer station improvement projects is $3.9 million. It was $2.9 at the May town meeting, so it's gone up $1 million in 6 months. Is that? I guess this is directed at Rob Faley.
So some of the money we had asked for in the spring, we wound up doing, we had change orders for the construction project now to bring some of Phase 1 into Phase 2. Some of the site work that we had planned to do under Phase 1, we now have to do under Phase 2. So, of course, it's a change order, so it's a premium for the contractor, but we have to do it because a general assumption was that both projects would be done at the same time. So we're eating up a little bit of that money. We're eating up a little of that money that we had left over for the owner's project manager that we didn't understand that we needed before because the bids were coming in higher than we anticipated. So there are just some additional costs that took away that extra money that we had left over that we weren't asking for. And then, of course, there's the escalation of costs since then.
Okay.
I think we're pretty conservative on our numbers. We may have some room at the end, but we won't know until the bids come in.
Yeah. Well, we know there are a lot of considerations and concerns among the neighbors regarding odors from the building and so forth. So I consider this a high-priority project, and I have no problem with the suggested, I know we're not making decisions tonight, but I'm just going to offer my thoughts. I have no problem with the allocation of the additional $900,000, as it were, to a borrowing, rather than putting it all out for borrowing and using $3 million for free cash. Center for Active Living, I'll just state my position on it. I did sit in on a presentation with the town manager and the chair of the Council on Aging maybe a month or so ago, and saw some numbers that he had from his own internal estimates, and saw kind of a redesign of the building, which all of which looked fairly appealing. And for me, there is a sort of a working limit of how much I'd be willing to spend on putting new money into that building. I don't want to be locked in, but it's in that $5 million range. Anything over that, I'd be inclined to say, do something else or knock that building down and put a new one up for $10 million if that's what it's going to take. We're going to have the presentation on January 7th.
Yep.
And my thinking is, and I've said this perhaps publicly, and I know I told the town manager several times this, as well as the Council on Aging Board, if it looks positive, I'd be inclined at that point to recommend that the Select Board have a portion of a future meeting after that devoted as a community forum to gauge public support. And if the public support were there, then we could put it on the article as an article for town meeting. And I'd be inclined to recommend the entire $5 million be paid out of free cash rather than put a borrowing forward. And my rationale for that is the money's there. When you borrow, I know this is a little different from what I just said about the transfer station, but when you borrow, you're incurring servicing costs, interest, and since the money has already been appropriated from the taxpayers, and this is a project of long standing that we might have a chance to bring to closure, I'd be inclined to support that. Just had a couple of other questions on the grinder pumps. We're awaiting at some point for the town manager to come forward with a recommendation for us on what to do with that. We've heard some somewhat competing. I actually don't think those recommendations from the two committees are that far apart on what we might do. But I think, we can't go forward with an article without resolving that policy first. And hopefully we will. The dredging, as you pointed out, we've done that with raise and appropriate in the past. The ambulance, I think the same. Community center flooring is new, but I think that could be raise and appropriate. The water storage tank, we had a long discussion about this, I think before you came on the board, Mr. Chairman, maybe you were, when Mr. Temple was here, and I think we were asking questions like, if it's cost this much, was it $2 million to paint this? It's more than paint, I understand. It's not just slapping some paint, a can of paint on there, but how much does a brand-new tank cost? I think we should get a little more information. Maybe you have something that you want to add to that tonight, but I think we should know that.
I'll put down
And-
the question.
And the other question I had, I guess these are some other projects that you haven't touched on, but they're in your memo, so I won't comment on them until we get to them. But those are my initial observations. Thank you.
I'm just
Thank
going to
you.
interject a comment that I understand that at the Golden Gate Bridge, they paint from one side to the other, and when they get to the other side, they turn around and go back and start all over again, go in the other direction. So painting is it's an expensive proposition. Shereen?
Yeah, it's clear that the CFL and the transfer station bubble up to the top as priorities for us. As far as CFL is concerned, again, I'm in Dean's camp to wait and see, what number comes at us as far as whether this is something we're going to go forward with.
Yep.
I don't have any particular notion of how I feel about free cash split or all funding. Again, that's going to be, a nuance that we're going to have to play out at the time when we get more information, because maybe that might offset some things that will be helpful. Again, how many community forums have we had on the CFL? I don't even know anymore. But that's all I have for real comments right now.
Okay.
Just to say that those are the two things that I think are very important to us going forward. And then as we go along, we'll just continue comments on the other projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Just a very, very simple comment. I mean, these topics, Center for Active Living, transfer station, those, sewer project, nothing new to us. I think the one thing we can all identify is that there have been specific questions directed to each of the projects that we have, the public has, and we need to address them to the best of our ability before we get to the point of if we're moving them actually to the town meeting warrant. Because there are certain thresholds, that, especially with the Council of Active Living, that $5 million number's been floated around, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. I think that it also opens up a bigger discussion of what is the best project moving forward. Transfer station, I'm a big proponent of moving forward with better facilities and et cetera for the staff. They've been very clear about that, but maybe some policy questions, future usage, we should flush that stuff out sooner than later. Happy to do that, and try to deal with some of the bumps in the road that may come with those conversations. And I mean, the sewer project, I mean, this is going to be an ongoing discussion. So with some, grinder pump issue this year, maybe in 5 years we're going to have a different issue to deal with. But yeah, I mean, we do need to have that dialogue with the public. So we have a lot of more homework to do on each of these topics. But I think we're heading in the right direction, and I think we've identified those that are important to us. I mean, obviously dredging, that's not a new topic.
Right.
I mean, we're going to be dredging through everyone's lifetime, forever. Yeah, it's yeah. Talk about painting projects,
That's our.
Yeah, that's our painting project. Ambulance. We probably clearly have a need for that. So I'm fine with the process we're going. Nothing's going to be set in stone tonight, but I think we have some more dialogue to move forward with.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll try to be brief. And maybe just to give you a top line, I like option 2 a whole lot better than I like option 1. And it starts with my feeling that we have this, I'm going to call it windfall, $11 million of free cash. That it's not like we get 11 million of free cash every year.
Right.
And I think you have to figure out what's appropriate to use that in light of a number of things historically. I don't disagree that the transfer station and CFAL are high priorities. I have no argument with that. I'm a strong supporter of both. I would make the offhand point or sideline point. whoever the commercial haulers are and whatever effect they have on the, on that facility, that doesn't mean that we don't need the renovation. I mean, we need it, whoever is dumping stuff there. So
Yep.
to me, that may be a project that we ought to focus on, but it's not one that causes me to say, well, we better wait and see whether we're gonna spend 3.9 million on that. So to come back to kind of just give a little background, to me, things like dredging and the ambulance and the community center flooring, those are the kinds of things that in my mind, if you have the free cash, that's where it should, that's how you would fund those in my mind. Although it's not as clear with respect to the transfer station, I do think that, you know, the circumstances that bring us to that situation, which were a number of considerations, including the fact that it lost by 20 votes in a meeting where there was, you know, significant, I want to say, nobody was wildly enthusiastic about spending money on anything, and I think that, you know, in another circumstance, in another atmosphere, it might have passed. So I'm cautiously saying I would dedicate the entire 3.9 of free cash to do that. With respect to the Center for Active Living, I have a real hard time. I'm a huge supporter. We need that facility. Everybody knows I wanted very much to see us do 1610. I would point out as what I'm sure some of my friends will characterize as an irrelevant aside, that you know, we have potentially 8.6 million of free cash today, which in 2021 would have built that whole facility at 1610, and would have hit 75 to 80% of the 2023 proposal, which included not only the capacity to do adult daycare, but also an overnight warming center. And I bring that up not as a, you know, I want to go back and fight that old war. I'm trying to figure out, Dean says 5 million plus or minus is his break point. I'm trying to figure out when are we throwing good money after bad with respect to a facility that is not a great facility as it is now. And the question is, how much bang for our buck do we get for 5 million or whatever the number is? That's my concern. The other issue for me is I think I really honestly think the voters should have they should have a say. And I recognize, as much as I want to see something get done, and and 2/3 may be another difficult mountain to climb. In light of the history here, I really think, and that's, by the way, the 2.5 approach.
Yep.
Is so it's got to get a 2/3 vote, and
Yes.
the only question is, well, it's only 2.5 million. To me, that's I think if you're going to give it to the voters, as I think you should, you ask for the whole 5. So those are my thoughts on those. The only other thing I want to say about the wastewater program and the grinder pumps, I would just point out, I agree with everybody, that's a decision that has to be made. The $1.5 million for grinder pumps, if you're thinking 6,000 per grinder pump, that's 250 grinder pumps. We're not going to be buying 250 grinder pumps for quite some time. I'm not quarreling with the estimate. All I'm saying is it's a number that's in there that probably doesn't relate to the reality of the timing of people hooking up to the sewer needing grinder pumps. And given that fact, I would also point out that, if I'm not sure what the SRF requirements are to qualify, But I believe that if you pay for the pump, the installation, and the service, you get SRF qualification. What does that mean? I don't know in detail, but I think we should at least understand that before we make a decision about that. So those,
I don't know, maybe Rob could.
no,
answer that.
I
Okay.
mean, I appreciate, he can speak to it if he likes. All I'm just putting that on the table for the
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
I'm not quarreling with, I'm glad you've got it in there. And frankly, if we can leave it in there without deciding those issues today, I'd be perfectly happy to do that as well. So those, I think I've covered everything that's, there's, we got a lot to worry about and a lot to think about, and we got to get this right. So
Yep.
thank you for your
Thank you.
contribution. This was helpful.
You're welcome.
Dean?
There is a quick answer to your question about the grinder pumps, as far as I recall. In order for the town to be eligible for the SRF, the town would have to own and maintain the grinder pumps. Install, own, and maintain. So
Yeah, okay.
we'd have to own them.
Yeah, well, I understand. I mean, I know what the or in principle what it is, but what it means in terms of how we get the grinder pumps in the ground and so for the details, that's probably something that is worthy of a further discussion. That's all I got. Any
Okay.
follow-up? Thanks very much. Do you need anything else from us?
Nope, that
Okay.
was it. Thank you. I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
It's very helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. ARPA,
ARPA.
go ahead.
So the town received ARPA funds in the amount of $626,000. These funds need to be obligated by December 31st of 2024 and expended by December 31st of 2026. If the funds are not obligated, this obligating meeting, we need to have a contract in place and a purchase order as well. The funds will be sent back to the federal government. These funds can be spent on government services, including but not limited to constructions, roads and infrastructure, provision of public safety and other services, health and educational services. We have identified 4 projects for funding, for proposed funding. The ADA compliance public restroom upgrades in the amount of $433,000. Next request, public records request software in the amount of $17,000. Hazardous waste program in the amount of $86,000, and the electrical work at Kate Gould Park in the amount of $30,000. We feel all of these projects will benefit the community.
Thoughts, comments, questions? Anything further?
That's
Jill?
all I have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Corey, go ahead.
I guess I'm gonna kind of go in reverse from where I originally was gonna go to. So the 86,707 for the wastewater or the hazardous waste. That's an annual expense, right? We have an annual expense to
We
that
do have
program.
an annual expense, and last year, we actually went over budget, and it was funded through Barnstable County ARPA, the overage. So this is a different funding. This is federal. This year, we've already seen increased costs, and we've already gone over the expenditure line in FY 2025. And we're expecting to also, instead of increasing the budget for '26, we would offset it with the $86,000 in FY 2026.
Okay, so the 86 is above and beyond what our normal budget would be?
Yeah, I think our normal budget is around $35,000 that we have, but we spend around 60,000. Yeah, yeah,
So the actual and the budget is large gap.
yes, a very large gap.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yep,
mean,
for the past couple, well, noticed it last year in
So-
'24.
And these are the events. It's not something that's delivered to the transfer station. It's our residents' participation in the
the
various.
quarterly programs, wherever they
Yes.
are, yeah.
Yeah, so somebody, a resident, can go and bring their stuff there for free, and then the town pays for it.
Okay, yeah, so it's not
That's
free.
not
It's not
free.
free, it's not free.
I
Like free
know.
cash is not free cash. And then, as delicately as I want to say this, the 433,000 for the restrooms, I mean, when I think of community projects that's, you know, I'm not knocking it, I think it should be done very well. I wouldn't, in my wildest dreams, have, for me, I would think that would be the top thing that we could get you know, for the bang for the community is fixing a couple restrooms. I mean, I feel we could have come up with a better project, especially when it comes to roadways and stuff. Yeah, how, I mean, I could think of other things, especially with roadway sidewalks and road intersections and everything else, that this was the top, you know, list applicant or choice. I feel like if we do choose this, we really didn't do our due diligence totally. I'm not overwhelmed by this option, to be honest with you.
So, in order to get federal funds, we have to go through a whole procurement process. And that's part of the reason why we selected this project, was because it had already gone through an RFP. It's already gone through all of the procurement that needed by the federal government. So the contract is going to be signed soon, regardless if we're going to pay it through ARPA or not. So that was one of the reasons why this was a good project to pay from the ARPA funds, because all of the procurement was already done. If we chose another project that was larger, then we probably wouldn't have made it in time for the December 31st.
Okay. Last question is, because of the timing limitations, if we were exploring other projects or whatever, we are in great jeopardy of basically sending this money back and getting nothing.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if I can just add, so it's been a couple of months, or even actually longer, that we've been working with the departments to find something that's, quote, shovel-ready. So it would be easy for us to compile the contracts, and also when we present our follow-up report on it, it have a very clear avenue. For this project in particular, it's almost using up 2 years of town appropriations for the entire ADA program for this bathroom project. So it's essentially, and Rob can speak to what it is exactly, but it's making the ones behind the town offices ADA compliant, but also there's a component for the parking lot too, to have access and better access to it. So I understand this seems like it's a lot of money with a little return on the investment, but if we look at the avoided cost of where we can redirect some of our other funds, town funds that have been appropriated or would be appropriated in FY26, this seemed like the perfect project for us.
I was on the same boat with Corey on the 400 and change, but hearing the explanation and the rationale behind it, I'm fine with the appropriation, so I don't have anything else to say.
Well, this is part of fulfilling the recommendations that came through the committee on, what's it now called, the committees, we've changed.
People with disabilities.
People with disabilities, thank you. And we had a consultant study, and we're obligated to make these changes. This is free money, as it were.
Another use of the word free.
Well, it's like free cash. But it's, I mean, it's coming to us from the federal government, so I'd be inclined to support it.
So I'm going to say two things, or several, but quick. It's December 10th, and
I know.
December 31st is 3 weeks from today.
Yep.
We have to have the appropriate commitments to get this money, and the money essentially that we're getting replaces money that we would, in all cases, have to spend elsewhere, have to find elsewhere. So I agree. I mean, and that brings me to my, so I'm supportive of this, and whatever you do, if we approve this, which I hope we will, please sign those contracts, get it done, make sure we get the money. My only comment here is that, and maybe it's irrelevant given the fungibility of the funds, but I really, I mean, you know, this has been around for 2 years, and I really do wish we had focused on this earlier, and, you know, maybe, who knows what we would have done differently. But then my last comment is, yes, I'm the liaison to the Committee on People with Disabilities. I have a lot of back and forth with them. There was a certain amount of frustration in that committee at the delays or at the fact that we couldn't get ourselves together as a town to be responsive to that report that Dean referred to. We're doing it here, and I'm glad to see that. And I think this is a perfectly appropriate use of the money, all things considered. So, thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm going to make a motion, if that's all right with everybody.
Please.
I move to approve the allocation of Towns American Rescue Plan Act funds in the amount of $567,569.30 for the following projects: ADA upgrades to the public restrooms behind the town offices at 549 Main, purchase and implementation of the Next Request public records management system, support for the town's participation in regional household hazard waste collection programs, and electrical upgrades at Cape Gould Park.
Second. All those in favor, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
You too, thank you.
Thank you. Next is committee appointments. We have 2 to consider for Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee. We have 2 open seats.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Move to appoint Gregory Connors as a member of the Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee until June 30, 2026, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye. Mr. Chair, I move to appoint James Nash as a member of the Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee until June 30, 2026.
I think, am I wrong? You got to do 25.
Oh,
for that
sorry.
one, if I'm not mistaken.
Did I goof?
No, one was 26, one was 25. You were allowed to pick which
Okay.
was which.
My apologies.
No problem.
Unless sooner revoked or successor is appointed.
So this is for 25.
Yes, it has to be 25.
Yes.
Second.
It was my,
Okay. All those in favor, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And next, we have Historical Seat Commission, 1 open seat and 1 open alternate seat, and they've asked us to move an alternate up to a full membership.
Mr. Chair, yeah, we had a death on the committee, second death recently, and so the chair has indicated to me that the appropriate thing would be to move Robert Stevens forward. I think that is the sense of the full board, of the full commission, but so I tried to move this forward so that they could have the full complement. So I move to appoint Robert Stevens as a member of the Historical Commission until June 30th, 2027, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis.
Aye.
And Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Thank you. I think unless there's anything else, we've concluded our business. I'll take a motion.
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 7:14. Good night, Chatham.